Doing this today, doing this today, which is notable now, right? Because this is not something that I so much do anymore. So it's notable. Somebody might see this notification and think, ah, it's doing that again. As opposed to the beginning of the year when I did this all the time. Why am I doing this, right? Well, when I started doing this, I thought I was doing this because I was choosing it, and I think that I'm starting to realize that I didn't choose to do this. That this is something that was inevitable that I would try to do. Um, is it honorable, noble, or is it more pathetic and pitiable? That's something that I've really wondered about this from the beginning. Am I doing an important work by talking to myself, or am I drawing attention to myself for no reason whatsoever? And it's kind of sad. Um, and it's kind of both. It's kind of both. I mean, it's good for people to educate themselves, right? Talk about things. And maybe my talking about things with people is in some way educational to others as they're on a journey that's fairly similar. But the thing about that is it has to bear out into some sort of actionable conclusion, right? There has to be something here that people can take away and do something with. Otherwise, it serves no purpose. And if it serves no purpose to anybody other than me, then really it's just an action that is about me, that's self-serving. And as a self-serving action, it's actually quite observably common that this is something somebody would do, especially somebody like me. So I don't remember what I talked about the last time that I did this, but I know that I started at the beginning of the year and as a reaction to um, primarily the January 6th insurrection. It was like, yeah, I saw this coming. There's a whole bunch of stuff related to COVID that led to a place that I was hyper focused on this, and now I'm seeing it boil over. And we very nearly had something catastrophic happen, and we need to now talk about it. But really, it's just one of many apocalypses that happen to be, concurrently taking shape. The most significant of which, of course, is climate change, because it's so imminent and obvious, and so is the fact that we don't seem to be intent on doing anything. So there's a whole bunch of like comboing off that global warming is going to do, because it's just so perfectly moonshot that there's all these things that are going to radiate off of one another and make it bonus points time when it comes time to count the temperature that we're going to be able to achieve here in the next centuries. So, as a parent, I should be very concerned about the well-being of my progeny, right? My children and potentially their children, especially because the circumstances that especially people like me have enjoyed for the past 400 years are coming to a rapid close, as well as all of the general quality of life that humanity has enjoyed for, I don't know, tens of thousands of years. Um, so yeah, that's fun. That's fun. That's the real big end of the world. But then there's all these other smaller end of the worlds. There's the ending of the sort of middle class in America, if that's what you really want to focus on. There is this return to nationalism, conservatism, the protection of the few in group at the expense of the subjugation of the many of the out group. And who is the in and out group depends on hegemony and your position in the world, both culturally, societally, and geographically. So anyway, there's a bunch of fun stuff, and we've got some billionaires who are going to space or something. That seems to be the meme of the moment, is billionaires going to space. But really, space is not meaningful. The meaningful thing that billions of dollars can achieve for you is the fertile land that humans can survive on. Maybe though, that's not going to be a terrible premium. Maybe so long as folks can afford to do the basics to survive, you know, there will be plenty of places for us to live, if you can call what we're doing living. Um, and that's how humanity has been throughout history. You know, there's a subsistence that we've achieved by and large. Uh, hmm, what a survivor bias, though, right? The obviously I am descended from the humans that did make it, and there likely have been a great many cullings throughout history where there have only been enough for some, and one way or another, those some made it through. So to cover a lot of ground very quickly, I felt compelled to participate in a dialogue and understand things and read and educate myself and sort of explore the possibility of what it might be to be a decent human being and, you know, share the planet with other people and act in such a way that we didn't get a game over. Really just too little too late, right? Like it's great that I'm having that epiphany or whatever, but it really just was a reaction to having my survival threatened, which uh, is a weird reaction to being part of a culture that brought this about, right? It's funny. I'm sure that if you're watching this, anybody who has watching this, you probably have seen pictures of yourself from before it dawned on you, and you try to recapture the look in that person's eyes of oh, there they are, just moving forward, trying to get theirs, you know, optimistic, sometimes even close-mindedly optimistic, ignoring, you know, negative possibilities, thinking all I have to do is fake it till I make it. And this assumption that, you know, I'm going to plow through into this awful world and still have the faith that it's a great world, because if I plow hard enough, I'll get mine. I'll get mine. And that's what it's all about to some degree. So it really the idea that somebody might reflect and try to learn about what reality really is and what we're all doing here is just a natural reaction to being threatened in some way. Our progress is threatened, our power is threatened, our dominion is threatened, our ability to reproduce and continue to dominate generation after generation is threatened. Our security, our estate, our what's the phrase, accustomed to a certain lifestyle. You know, the lifestyle that we're accustomed to is going away. So it's natural that one would react the way that I did to January 6th, thinking I'll be a good boy, I'll read about things, I'll try to participate in you know, culture and society and humanity, as I know we should. I mean, obviously we should. Obviously, humans are social creatures. We are dependent on the goodwill of other humans. The things that matter most to us are given to us by other humans. Either you know, the values and virtues that we extol are benefit us in that other people are good to us, or benefit us in that we are good to other people and we accrue those values for ourselves, or, you know, even potentially negative things like power and control are given to us by other people if we're threatening enough, if we show our teeth. So yeah, we're social, and humans are inclined toward goodness. So not only are we inclined toward being social, and the things that we desire most in the world are social, and our very survival depends on us coming together and being social, but also we have a tendency toward naturally being nice to one another. I mean, we tend to be nice to the people that surround us more so than the people that are afar off that we just sort of hear about. So there's a us versus them that always sort of develops, that like, hey, I've seen you, I know who you are, and somebody was mean to you, and therefore they must be the other out there that we don't like, because that's a good way to construct a story, is us versus them, the in and the out, right? But naturally, our inclination is that if we've met somebody, if we know somebody, we like them. And if we like somebody, we're good to them, and it makes us sad that they're hurt. So yeah. Humans are naturally social. Humans, there's some degree of survival mechanism that's built into us that is beyond just the individual creature. So it's crazy when people say, like, I'm going to go off in the woods with my rifle and some landmines and crackers that will last me 100 years and a water purifier, and I'm going to survive that way. No, you're not. That's not survival for a human being. Survival for a human being is a social experience. Let alone the synergy that comes from being able to do things in groups. Okay, I can stop talking so fast because whoever it was that was watching has gone away. So I'm going to take the slow route now and just talk to myself. So why go down this path? Go down this path because you feel threatened. What do you find when you go down this path? Well, you find that there's a lot of stories that exist in human culture that relate to power structures and relate to ensuring that people like me have what they need in order to continue to move forward unimpeded, seeking to get theirs in a society that maybe doesn't equally give to everyone. So, I mean, as a human being, naturally, you want to, from the moment you're placed on the earth, excel. You want to excel, you want to accrue, you want to be renowned, you want to be praised, you want to acquire friendships and bestow upon yourself, all of the good things that come with being a good person. You want to be able to go through life continually increasing. That's sort of how, a human thriving is somebody who makes it through life being continually given more responsibility, more natural resources, more dominion and control, and all of the things that we think are great. So, we want to make friends, and we want to have power, and we want to have influence, and we want to have resources. I don't think that there's anything constructed about that. I think that's just the experience of being alive. And so when we start this with a certain degree of privilege, there are some frameworks for understanding society that we have to live within and not stray outside of in order to justify our continued march toward having more than what we started with. Because if you were to venture outside of the safety of any of those structures that you exist within, being who you started this race as, then you might see that actually it's best that you not participate at all, right? Because if the individual must excel in order to be self-actualized, in order to be a successful organism, and the individual starts way up here and yet recognizes that the social stratus is something that we feel strongly about and responsible for and responsible to, then it no longer seems right to go up from here, right? It seems right to sort of matriculate into it somehow to find a balance. Not to say that any of us are living at a standard that if we reinvested in other human beings would become less of a standard. Obviously, if we all cooperated with one another and looked after one another, then the standard would be increasingly higher per individual, not just as an average, but as an individual. But it's all I'm trying to say is that there are frameworks of understanding the world that you sort of need to live within in order to justify your continual ascent, given that you started from a place of relative privilege. And it's those very frameworks that make it difficult for us to find that synergy of cooperation with one another. In very simple terms, people need to, people who are well off need to have what's the word? An understanding of Christianity and wealth and heaven and righteousness that relates goodness with material success, right? People who are well off need to assume that the people who are not well off are not well off because they've made poor choices that not just reflect on the outcomes in their material life, but also reflect on their moral character. So there are certain things that we learn to attribute with goodness that really are reflective of our social and ethnic class and society. So the things that you defer um, worship is a strong word, but reverence for the things that you consider to be right and proper, the things that you choose to be obedient to, are things that reflect the values that you have that allow you to continue to believe that you are within the bounds of where people ought to be. And if more people were that way, then they would also be as well off as you are now. And if you are not well off, then it's, continuing to invest in further in those values that will get you to that place eventually. Um, I went on a tangent there. I was trying to get at, why am I doing this? Why was it inevitable that I'm doing this? And why is it really, I think, um, uh, not value added ultimately? Um, so I have always struggled with the idea of, why would I entertain some content, some lesson, some perspective from somebody who was not in a place already that was where I sought to be. So this is where biographies become very useful, right? Because you want to try to crack the code of a successful person, somebody that you view as being morally, financially, whatever it is, successful. Um, and you want to understand life as they do because you want to be successful in the way that they are. So why would you ever try to understand somebody's perspective who is not successful? Or in another way of speaking, why would you ever try to understand the perspective of somebody who is sad, or somebody who is not loving life at all times? So this was sort of a perspective that I had growing up, and it's why I never read fiction. I always tried to read nonfiction whenever possible, because I felt like reading fiction was problematic for a whole bunch of reasons, mostly because it would distract me from understanding what is, because I had this belief of objective truth, and it might, not picking and choosing the things that I chose to read might lead me down a path of believing something that somebody who did not enjoy their life, or did not succeed at life, or did not thrive in their life believed. So not only was it like, I need to understand all things that are true, but all things that are true that propel me forward into a successful life, because these must be the same, right? So my framework for understanding was that the things that make you successful in life, the things that get you ahead, are the most true. Convenient that perspective was, right? Gosh, what if the things that were most true in the world really were not beneficial to the individual and did not propel them above 99.99% of other humans? That would be inconvenient, right? Would you rather have information that, if you internalized, drove you to be in an a pristine premier place compared to other people, or would you rather consume information that more reflected the reality of the world? Um, well, you just have to assume. You have to start with the assumption that that the world is good, right? And that you are important to the world. You're a special boy. You are the center of the universe, and God loves you. And God loves you more than He loves anybody else. And therefore, you you can know as much as is possible to know about the world, while also not bringing any harm to your psyche and your will to dominate existence. Um, so, where does that lead me? Oh, I went down that path because a lot of this year, the reason that I chose to stop doing these for such a long time, one reason was I had another baby. I didn't have a baby. I'm sorry. My wife had another baby. I'm just here. Um, we had another child, and it took me to a place. I don't know. I don't. Maybe it's the world is clearly off the rails and we're not going in a good direction, and that blew my mind and took me out of a place where I had a stable framework for understanding the world. And now here's another child. We had Lainey, I felt compelled to direct her to a certain understanding that would empower her and allow her to subject the world and put herself on top of it, while also having an understanding of goodness and moral character and all that kind of thing. But as I had just expressed, these two things were not separate in my mind. But after seeing things sort of unravel and starting to realize that the world is falling apart in a great many ways that I am complicit in, to a degree, to that point, much to my horror. Um, it felt like the onus of fatherhood was no longer something that I was prepared to accept, because I am not going to give my daughters something that is going to enable their world to fall apart, right? I don't want them to be complicit in their own demise, but also I don't want to give them any framework for understanding that's going to allow them to open them up to damage. I want to give them a sword and a shield, and I want it to be gleaming and shiny, and I want them to run headlong into battle and not suffer injury. I want them to stand at the top of the hill with a stick in their hand, looking down on everybody else. I want them to experience a victorious life. I want them to not doubt themselves. I want them to stand, in the front of everything that they do. I don't want them to doubt. And there's a lot of work that went into crafting the psyche that I wielded in my younger years, about lacking doubt and self-reflection, and for better and worse. And it projected me, it propelled me, it allowed me to have faith in myself in dire circumstances. It pushed me forward when all evidence suggested that maybe I give up, but it also had me steamroll over things that were difficult for me to understand, had me always taking my own side when there were possibly reasons why I should be looking at the damage that I'm causing around me. So that brings us to now, I think. Um, so I didn't post anything because I went to some pretty dark places in that time period, because all of a sudden it was now my responsibility to be a father for some children that were not only going into a world that was falling apart, but I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the answers to save the world, and I didn't have the answers on how to be a whole person in this environment while not also contributing to the problem. Plus they're girls, and I don't know, it's probably going to be a different concoction, right, to give them the strength and pride and power that I had, which probably led me to do some things that were not in the best interests of the women in my life when I was younger, because I was so confident and I was so brash and I was so bold and I was so intent on serving my own purposes. So am I going to end up doing more harm if I pass those same things down? There's not really a really good answer for how to provide these girls with the self-serving armor and confidence, and the best defense is a good offense type of ambition that I had, that I seem to not be able to escape. Gosh, it's so hard to just get to that point of the conversation. Okay, so January 6th, world falling apart, had a child, didn't know what to do, and then this immense depression hit because I felt utterly unqualified for the role of father, and I lost the joy in it. I lost the joy in it because I still had the responsibility of raising, of taking care of an infant baby and a 2-year-old, but I no longer felt like I was steering the ship. I no longer felt like I was contributing in any meaningful way toward their material or mental success. Um, and I took 6 weeks off. I actually have 12 weeks, but I took 6 weeks off because I didn't feel like I could make it any further than that. And that was a really dark, low point. And I didn't feel like recording anything because I didn't have the excess energy. I already didn't feel like I had anything of any value to say to anybody. And um, and I felt like I would be doing a disservice to anyone who listened to me if I was giving information from a place of defeatism. Like if I am not thriving, then the information that I have to provide is toxic. Uh, because what value is self-reflection from somebody who's not teaching you, coming from a place that you ultimately want to be? And I was wrong to believe that, because I should have recorded some of those things. I should have documented some of those thoughts, because I could have more quickly cemented what they were and where they were coming from, and I could reflect on those more readily now than I can in my memory. Eventually, I think I hit a place where I just sort of uh, rejected. Um, rejected this idea that I should diminish. It was totally personal, and it came from I know I went over in great deal detail last time the Viktor Frankl book Man's Search for Meaning, which was just sort of like, yeah, no, I don't need a reason to exist. I want to exist. I want to win. I don't want to be conquered. I want to conquer. And if all of this is coming from a place of, I'm struggling with a new way of conceiving of the world, then maybe that new way of conceiving of the world is wrong. So, what is the alternative way of conceiving of the world? Well, the alternative theory is a theory of power and control. So that is where I got stuck for a while on this theory of power and control. That um, I do not want to be in a place where I want to end my own life. That's not an okay place to be. And if what's putting me in that place is the possibility that I might not have some control over my life or dominion over the things that I want and need, then it's dominion over the things that I want and need that really matters. It's power and control that really matters, and it is a small person who thinks that way, and rightly so. Trauma puts somebody in a position where they feel like they need to defend themselves or take for themselves. And January 6th was sort of my trauma of like, oh my gosh, the world can just end, and we can not have anything to say about that. So therefore, I need to build more defenses and fortifications and strategies for having control over my own well-being and the well-being of my family. And what does my well-being mean for me? Well, I started looking at my own Maslow's hierarchy of needs and saying, I need this, I need that, I need this, and that. These are the things that the world owes me, and I have to go out and get them. And exert my influence in order to yada yada yada. So it made me into a textbook awful person. My new way of conceiving of the world made me into a textbook awful person, and it's just a normal cycle of trauma and reaction of oh my gosh, I'm not in control, and I don't have a guarantee of being okay, and therefore I need to control the circumstances to make sure that I am okay in the long run. And what does being okay mean? It depends. Depends on it depends on not just the like what kind of lifestyle have you become accustomed to, but also what do you believe the world owes you? What have you been told that the world owes you? And naturally, as a straight white Christian American male, I've been told that the world owes me a lot, to be honest. I've grown up in structures that have allowed me to believe that the things that I have rightly. And gosh, that's just not true. But it does afford a certain amount of power and control over my environment to ensure that I continue to have those things that I'm accustomed to having and that I believe that I should have. So it's enabling in that way that I am able to conceive of the world in that way. Not intentionally, like I said, I grew up believing that I was just the most wonderful, humble, kind, empathetic, altruistic person that somebody could be. So these are things that I just internalized as being like what it means to be a good person. I didn't think of them as being malicious. I just happened to be God's favorite little boy. I don't know. It's just how it is. So that leads us full circle around two things. The first is there a legitimate foundation there in the concept of power and control, which is kind of shaky because not only does it make you an awful person, that power and control is really the center of all of your existence, but also it violates that initial thing that I said about humans being social creatures and wanting good for one another. But it also just seems counterintuitive, right? That somehow that's the right answer. It just doesn't seem like good politics. It also brings me back around to the inevitability of me doing this. As a special boy, I want your attention. As a special boy, I feel like educating myself in some way is important to allowing the continued propagation of my own voice and opinion into the world. And that is where somehow somebody decided that I needed to watch Bo Burnham's Inside for some reason. So I'm talking. So I'm talking because I have to talk, because God forbid I ever stop being the center of attention for 5 minutes. Uh, but if I just am penitent enough and sit here and work this out in front of people, then I'll earn all my good boy points back, and everything will be as it should be. And I don't have to go on suffering the whole weight of the world anymore, because I will have done my time in thought prison, and I can resume my happy place where I not only have all of the things that I need in my life, but everybody loves me, and I have control over my environment, and I get the things that I want because I asked for them and because I said please. And the evils of the world no longer oppress my every waking minute. Hopefully they'll all be solved, but to whatever degree I can believe that. I would like to believe that. I would like to believe that all the problems are solved. Uh, do I want to continue to hate everything while I wait for them to be solved, or participate in their being solved? No, I don't want to continue to hate everything. There of course comes a point where um, you get to the place where either I end or this nonsense continues, and you're like, all right, I guess I'm nonsense. I guess I'm just nonsense. In order to exist, I must be nonsense. And by nonsense, I mean the need to fulfill this notion of progress and success and self-actualization and consumption of material circumstances and resources. I need to be a part of the nonsense. I really just am one of the part of the mold on the surface of the sphere, and either I stop being that or I continue being that. So yeah, gosh, wow. Thank you, Bo Burnham, for bringing me all the way back to that place again. Right after I thought I had it all figured out. So just a couple of days ago, I was like, oh my God, I figured it out. I figured it all out. And I did this like absurd, I don't know, drawing thing. And I really do think that there's value in what I was saying at the time. If oh God. But it was really like about how power and control. I got to a point where I believe that power and control was everything. Absolute nonsense, right? But I couldn't prove that it was nonsense, because power and control is how you influence the allocation of resources, and resources are the things that we need in order to survive. That the difference between resources and just matter is that resources have some human ascribed value. Um, so water, land, green grass to walk in, fresh fruit and vegetables to pick and eat, clean air to breathe, a nice place to lay down, shelter from the elements and from animals or other human beings that want to kill you, the ability to reproduce and have offspring that survive to the next generation, and yada yada yada. The general Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those resources that enable all of these things that are material and real and make up the real world. So resources is the border of the human experience, and matter, value plus matter equals resources. So matter is the side of like the objective reality. The part I was talking about earlier, it was like, man, if I just understand objective reality, then my life will be great, because these two things have something to do with one another. Objective reality is this idea of like, you could say formulas, you could say constants, it's kind of the same thing. Matter, time, space, gravity, all of the constants that you can list out in a document that say these are the things that we've discovered to be true about the world, whether you write it as a constant or an equation. I was using the analogy of uh, each of these can be considered a prism, and as light passes through it, there are certain things that occur. So all of existence is sort of like, these constants, these formulas, these mathematical truths influencing one another and causing crazy stuff to happen, just because that's what they are. As time occurs and matter occurs, you see some weird stuff. And as gravity exists just as a matter of fact within that that complex system of constants, there's some weird stuff that happens, and we're part of that weird stuff. We're the matter that gets arranged in a certain way and becomes haunted. So that's the reality. Um, but as soon as we ascribe value to it, then it becomes resources. So on the human side, how do humans experience the world is in terms of stories. That's how we see things. We see things as causes and effects. We see things as this person, or this protagonist attempted and this antagonistic force prevented, and the protagonist overcame in this way. What is how do you get the good at the end? So there's good and evil, right and wrong, antagonist, protagonist, cause and effect. All of these things that are how we process information. That when you put that together with the constants and formulas that make up objective reality, the closest thing to an exchange rate there is resources, because it's matter that we've ascribed value to. So it's real stuff that's become part of our stories. So I was like, oh, so all of that really matters is resources, and the way that you have resources is power and control over what people believe about things. So I had all these like secondary uh, honor and courage and humility and righteousness, and the good things that we want to believe about ourselves, that are meaningful, that one can secure, that are immaterial, come from stories that we tell one another, uh, that dominate culture, that allow us to believe that we're doing something right or wrong, but they're immaterial. The only material thing are resources, and the way that you secure resources is by participating in telling stories to secure for yourself power and control over the way that the resources are allocated. So those people who are looking for things like honor and courage and grasping immaterial things for themselves are getting those things by reading stories and participating in stories, but the stories are being crafted by those looking for resources and exerting power and control in the form of narratives over other people who are using those narratives to get immaterial benefits for themselves. Intangibles. So if you were coming from the perspective of like, teach me how to be a good person, you're looking for stories. And if you're trying to secure power and control over people, you're telling them stories. So you might be looking up and seeing things like religion, but ultimately you're looking down and employing things like politics. Same coin, different side, right? Depending on which side you're looking at it. So the most real is objective reality, and then from there you have resources. And in order to secure resources, you have power and control. And from power and control, you use politics, which are stories about reality, which confer values that cause people to behave in certain ways. And so people will behave in congruence with those stories, because stories are how we experience reality, and that's how we secure for ourselves those intangibles. So you have this person over here who's like, I'm going to live my life in such a way that I get honor. And you're like, perfect, that's exactly what I wanted, because that's how I maintain control over the resources, which are objective reality. So I was like, this is the circle, right? Like this is the end of the human centipede, this person who's seeking honor. And then this is the middle of the centipede, the person crafting narratives for supporting power and systems of power and control. And then this is the front of the centipede, the person actually eating the resources that reality, objective reality, is made up of. Problem is, so the like, aha, I've cracked it, I've solved my moral conundrum, was, okay, so honor and courage and all these intangibles, they're not real because we give them to one another, right? Based on how we understand the world. Well, you can allocate resources in that way. People's sense of charity and righteousness and benevolence influences them to give resources to people. So really, these stories affect resources. And in that way, isn't power and control something that humans give to each other? Is this not also an intangible? So if any of these things are not real, but they can influence how resources are allocated, then obviously this thing, which is just a story in a way that humans give one another, you can't you can't have power and control in a system where nobody's capable of recognizing power and control, right? So it must be to a certain degree a social construct. Um, I say that, but then I'm trying to imagine. Well, if I don't believe in 50,000 tanks, it doesn't mean that they're gone. Um, but yeah, anyway, the awesome like aha moment there for me was, oh, power and control are also intangibles. So if the only tangible is resources, the only tangibles are matter that we need to consume to survive. Um, Matter arranged in certain ways that are pleasing to us that we can continue to consume to survive. Uh, then both the stories that govern our politics, that govern the stories that govern our virtues, that govern our behaviors, are also as intangible as the other side, which is the power and control that we give to or take from one another. So that made me all feel yay, happy, good. Until Bo Burnham put me right back in the crap, which is this whole journey again is just me trying to rationalize away a moment of impotence on January 6th. This moment of God, the world is ending, and I don't have control over it. I don't have philosophical control over it. I don't have stories that can make it go away because again, I grew up in a framework where there was good and evil, right? So I would turn to that framework to say like, oh yeah, this awful thing might be happening, but at least I can absolve myself of it because I believe in not doing awful things. And therefore, this awful thing naturally will be condemned within my framework of understanding. And therefore, I can use that as a moral superiority and I can weather the storm in that way that I know it'll go away because it is morally depraved to behave in this way. And my existing structures of power will ensure that it does go away because of the moral depravity of it all. However, it seems like the structures that I had believed in about power and righteousness and goodness and humility and charity and benevolence and godliness and yada 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 were all like, man, gung ho, let's do this. Like, let's kill some people. We can't keep having abortions in this country. We've got to murder everybody and enable the police to do the same until they get in our way when we're trying to breach the Capitol. Yeah, it was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need a new framework. I need a new framework. I've somehow fallen through the cracks. I don't know what happened, but y'all forgot me. Like this whole way of understanding the world that's somehow both enabling, empowering, and absolving is like not doing neither of those things for me right now because you all don't look absolved of any damn thing, and you are taking away the environment that I grew up in that allowed me to feel comfortable and confident in my own skin. So yeah, fell through the gaps, and that falling through the gaps took some things from me. Took comfort, confidence, security, and in doing so, sent me to a different inevitable path of education, self-empowerment, subverting the power structures that I feel like betrayed me, because, surprise, surprise, I must have a platform, right? Like I must continue to I'm going to read these books. I'm going to consume this message and I'm going to understand how to fix the world, not so that I can roll up my sleeves and go out there and plant trees or whatever, but so that I can remain behind a podium selling things that are genuinely true about the world, that make other people feel good about themselves and give them some degree of honor to pursue, and humility and benevolence to claim for themselves, establishing systems of power whereby my voice can somehow enable people to feel good about themselves and continue their conquest in life. because we have to do both, right? Like we need to do good for the earth because the earth is dying, it's going to go away. We need to do good for our country because our country is falling apart and it's going to be taken over. And we need to do good for the international community because the international community is suffering separatism as well as immense crisis on the horizon for different places around the world. But we need to do that all within the framework of continuing to feel good about ourselves and good about staying alive and good about thriving. And by thriving, I mean continuing to secure more resources for ourselves than our parents did for themselves. Otherwise, we're not thriving. We're not executing the prime directive of existence. Fortunately, though, these seem to be congruent, because anytime you put a group of people together, they seem to be more competent at securing wellness for for themselves and one another than any individual on their own. So naturally, if we were able to conceive of some framework whereby we could all collectively do good for one another and look out for one another, right, then we'd be unstoppable because everybody would be self-actualized. Everybody would have all of the resources that they could possibly need. They would never need to secure for themselves more resources than they need because they would always have all the resources that they need. They would never need to prove that their barn had more grain in it, because anytime they needed grain, anytime they wanted grain, they could consume grain until they barfed if that's what they wanted to do, because we've collectively somehow provided enough for one another, because we don't spend our time on stupid things, because the common good is more important than anything else. So yeah, naturally these things do align with one another. Caring for one another, looking out for one another, experiencing the human condition of being a social creature who cares about other creatures, and the effectiveness of the power of the collective working in unison, and the material well-being of anybody who participates in that system, knowing that they'll be cared for, because if they have a need, that need is important to the collective in some way. But we've just sort of all decided that it just sounds so not good for existing power structures and ways that power and control are utilized in our current world to ensure that the few have resources beyond what they need, so that they never have to worry about being in the positions of the many who don't have the resources that they need. So we're like, hey, well, trauma is just this convenient little mechanism that takes you from being your default state of oppressed to needing to oppress others. Eventually this concept of power and control will dawn on you, because you realize that you don't have power over your own body. You don't have power over your own environment. Somebody has taken that from you because they're insecure, because somebody took it from them. So this system of trauma, being moved from like the oppressed to oppressor, is so important to us that we need to continue to experience and manufacture that trauma, and we can't dismantle it for the purposes of trying to make sure that everybody has enough and doesn't experience trauma. Trauma is very important to not only the system continuing, but also the people who have the option to continue it uh, taking that option, because trauma has put them in such a place that they revere power and control above uh, maintaining systems of power and control above any potential goodwill for one another in humanity. It doesn't matter if we all could be better off if we work together. What matters is that I have mine, because one day I didn't, because somebody took it from me. So I'm going to take it from them. I'm going to take it from somebody else, so that that person feels compelled to also be in this spot. So I guess all of this is to say that here I am talking to a camera, expressing some understanding of the world that unfortunately I am somewhat destined to ignore, right? Um, because, for one, I grew up in systems of understanding that enabled me to continue to try to get more for myself, which is important as a human being, that I have that ability to self-actualize and grow. Despite the fact that I was near the top of whatever the totem pole we've decided we need to structure our society in. I say that not because I grew up wealthy, which really genuinely would be me succeeding in some way. I say that because I drank the Kool-Aid that enables wealthy people to remain wealthy, and I believed about myself that I was special and important. I was an enabler. I was an unwitting enabler because it allowed me to believe that there was still opportunity for me to grow in a world that rightly put many people below me. Um, it's such a weird thing to talk about, right? Like, but um, it used to manifest itself in innocent ways. Dad always would say, "Well, when the Lord loves you," and by that he meant um, sometimes things just work out beyond any explanation, and I have experienced that so many times in my life. Um, when the Lord loves you, there's an implication there, right? That there's some degree of love and success being related to one another, especially when that success comes at you from out of nowhere that you don't deserve at all. Um, it's a lot easier to say, "Oh, it's a blessing. It's a blessing from the Lord," than it is to say, "Is there some imbalance here? Is this anomaly occurring for a reason that might be systemic?" Uh, you don't have to think about it if you can just say, "Well, huh, I'm just special. I'm just special." So these ways of believing about the world enable you to enjoy your place in the world without having to think too hard about it. Yeah, so here I am, trying to reclaim some of my what I felt was the starting point, and projecting myself on further, but knowing full well that seeking for myself power and control is the antithesis to reaching this better state, both morally and materially, because materially we can only really reach a better state as a species if we can work together and focus on spending our time on the things that are important to securing well-being for other humans. If we did that, then we'd be materially more well off. And it's also the morally correct thing to do, and it gives us the opportunity to solve some of these big, awful problems that are facing us. You know, imminently, that are going to change the world for the worse and make it so much more difficult for us to provide for our children what our parents provided for us. So there's a whole bunch of restructuring that needs to happen in order to do these things. But yet, uh, for me, this all starts with me platforming myself, right? That's what I'm doing. That's what this is. This is me with a camera and a microphone talking to the internet because, as far as I know, the only place that I can make a difference, the only right way for a person like me to behave, is to be some sort of a thought leader, because somehow that is my right, I guess. And I am only able to perceive this trend because I can see people who, like Bo Burnham or Dan Harmon, who understand that the world is falling apart and they're part of the problem, and that just them talking for the purposes of drawing to themselves some sort of credit for participating and understanding that the world is falling apart is their way of recapturing the status that they lost um, when they stepped outside for a moment and thought, uh, "Oh, I can't have the moral high ground and the physical material high ground during a disaster at the same time." Um, when so many people are suffering, when the world is falling apart. So, as I don't remember the lyrics because I'm not definitely not going to watch it twice. But is comedy appropriate when the world is falling apart? Is philosophical, you know, jargon appropriate when the world is falling apart? Is me showing to you how many books I've read, or how greatly I can think, or how much I care about people important as the world is falling apart? No, it's not. This is not meaningful to anybody. And like I said earlier, I'm not in in a place of material success that anybody can watch this and be like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, if I just think like him, I'll be like him and then I'll be successful." No, this is not, I'm not showing you the lifestyles of the rich and famous here. I might be poisoning your mind. I might be giving you a toxic way of thinking, right? But the key, the important part of all of this is not that I'm cracking some secret code and we're going to save the world. The key important part of this is that I am talking and I have a platform, and that's where I ought to be. Um, So it's challenging. We very much do want to save the world. We very much do want to work together. We very much do want to avoid climate catastrophe and war and genocide. And we want to ensure that humans work together to provide for one another the best standard of living possible by actually listening to the lived experience of other humans on the planet. We want to end the cycles of trauma that have people hoarding resources just for the purposes of not being subjected to the same trauma that they're subjecting to other people to by hoarding resources in the first place. Um, but this is not this is not that. We're not saving the world right here, right now. I'm just showing you that I care and can read and can talk and can be trusted with a microphone and need to be pat on the head for doing so. It's funny when some of the people that I know who think most deeply about all this kind of stuff and really desperately want to participate in some sort of social movement or commentary or demonstrate some understanding or goodwill or looking for something to do, at the end are like, man, I'm trying here. Why is nobody coming and giving me what I need and want? And like, why can't I just have everything wonderful all the time? Because look, I'm trying so hard, guys. I'm thinking about stuff. Somebody should come give me a back rub. Because, I mean, look at me. I'm thinking, trying. Kind of betrays the underlying motivation, right? Okay. It is the long-haired, bearded philosopher is the 2020s version of the nice guy. You heard it here first. I'm gonna really regret wearing this look in the future when somebody actually documents all of this and figures out what all of this was about. It's about trying to recapture some degree of cultural narrative and superiority in the midst of chaos. Yeah, this is going to be a bad look. All right, so that's all I've got. Thanks everybody. Yada yada yada. Like, subscribe, whatever. I'd love to say that I read something, but I didn't. I keep intending to continue to read Framer's Coup, but I actually am making progress at work again, as if that matters. I might yet not need to be a wonderful, charming philosopher in order to conquer the world. I might be able to participate in the old-fashioned systems of corporate. Glad I didn't say what I actually was thinking about saying. Elbow rubbing and existing power structures that are quite consequential in our era, our time and place in the world. For now, I wonder if we can. I wonder how much the state monopoly on violence will factor in or withstand the coming climate crisis. Factor into or withstand the coming climate crisis. I mean, naturally, money makes the world go around, and there are fewer and fewer people with larger and larger sums, and those sums, those few people with large amounts of resources just happen to align to the fact that very few people will be very little of the world may remain as livable land, and therefore it will take an exorbitant amount of resources in order to secure that livable land for oneself. So private militia, private military is going to become increasingly important. But if private military is really just a what's the difference if money can buy politics? What's the difference between a private military and a state military? It's the same thing, right? So why draw a line? So I wonder what we'll be defending in the coming decades. Who will be defending in the coming decades? For what purpose? Is there a place in this new world for a strong central bureaucracy in maintaining these affairs as they progress. I wish I didn't have these thoughts. Wish I didn't think like that. The right way to think would be, how can we achieve that place where everybody is able to act in a way that comes naturally to a human being, caring for one another and benefiting one another and having resources enough for everyone, because what we care most about is that we have resources enough for everyone, and disregarding any alternative framework for allocating resources as being just simply the result of trauma that we no longer have to uphold. There's no reason for somebody to have more than they need. And there's no reason that anybody can't have as much as they need. Okay. I guess the world's going to burn up. So that'll be interesting. I have to go figure out how to make that okay for my daughters, who I care a great deal about, to ensure that they at least have what I have. They at least can have these worries in their midlife crisis for their own children, instead of I wonder what the world's going to be like when they're my age. All right, I guess that's it. Thanks for hanging out. It's been a good hour, and away we go.